welcome to another episode of Your Next Favorite Movie podcast. I'm your host, Josh G.
Whoa. Chad, what the hell are you doing, man? You know what? Never mind. I'll just take over, man. I got this. And welcome to a very special episode of Your Next Favorite Movie podcast. I am Chris.
And I'm Chad.
And Josh couldn't be here with us today, which means it's our show.
And not his.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
There's no crying in baseball!
I ate his liver with some fava beans. A nice cliente.
That was totally wicked!
If I can change, and you can change, everybody can change!
According to legend, there is a lost princess whose journey home begins with 3 tasks, each one more deadly than the last. Critics are calling Pan's Labyrinth a masterpiece that fries your nerves and fires your imagination. Pan's Labyrinth, rated R, starts Friday, December 29th.
All right, guys. So with a 95% critical rating and a 91% audience critical score as well on Rotten Tomatoes, Pan's Labyrinth, directed by Guillermo del Toro, was a success at the box office. It started off with a $19 million budget and then ending with $83.9 million. Overall, this is a really good universal acclaim movie. It sounds like the majority of people love this movie, including mine. It's my personal favorite. So today we're going to go ahead and jump right into this conversation. Joining us today are the co-creators and co-writers of the successfully crowdfunded comic series Pocus Hocus. And I know it sounds really different because most people want to say Hocus Pocus. That's what people are mostly used to anyway. But this is a really great concept, a really great story, great stuff. So with that said, how about we just turn it over to our guest? And Alan, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Hey, guys. I'm Alan, and I am the co-writer of Pocus Hocus. And it's funny that you say that because, whenever we first started writing the thing, it was difficult for us to say Pocus Hocus because, of course, we want to say Hocus Pocus. But now when we hear people say Hocus Pocus, it sounds weird to me. It doesn't roll off the tongue anymore.
It sounds backwards. It's like now we have to struggle to say Hocus Pocus.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the film with Bette Midler and Sarah Jessica Parker and all that, we immediately, for me, I don't know if it's the same for Alan, but for me, I immediately just go Pocus or Hocus Pocus.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then great segue for the audience. That's Will. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I can't say Pocus Hocus or Hocus Pocus typically in conversation, so. That's the first that's the introduction to me. So
well, thank you guys so much for being here today. We really do appreciate it. And from what I understand, from what Chad told me, you guys are from West Virginia.
Yes. Yeah, we are. We both actually went to high school together. We became friends in 11th grade and have just stayed great friends ever since.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Because Chad and I, we were born in West Virginia, technically.
Oh,
Bluefield.
Oh wow. Okay.
Where'd you say you were born?
Bluefield.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so Bluefield
nice.
is actually 45 minutes away from us. We live in Beckman.
Yeah, it's not that. It's a hop, skip, and a jump away, I suppose. Yeah.
Our dad lived there his entire life, so he knows the whole entire landscape. So we could sit there and go, oh yeah, these people are from such and such or whatever, and he would just go, oh okay, I know where that's at and how many minutes away, and he'll know like all these different landscapes and stuff, or little buildings or something. Some that would make it different and identifiable.
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
That's
cool. Small world.
Small world.
So I gotta ask you guys this one question before anything else. What is the inspiration for Pocus Hocus? What got you guys together to be like, you know what? I got this idea for this magician guy and a soul-sucking demon coming together. So I'm really curious how this all came about.
So I guess I'll start, Will, and then I'll let you finish, because it's kind of how everything happened chronologically.
Yeah.
So I actually had the idea for Pocus Hocus before it was called that stupid name that we agreed on. Back in the Wayback Machine, whenever I was 8, before I could even spell the word magician, which I could barely do now, I was trying to write a comic book. Of course, it's made on like loose leaf scrap paper, and I still can't draw. And it was called The Magician, and it was about just this superhero magician that, of course, I never did anything with. I only made it to the first page, and then that was it. And it's just crazy how ideas can just stick with you, whether you think about it or not, and they're just embedded in your subconscious. Well, I guess something just struck one day, and I approached Will and I said, "Hey, I've been kind of working on this idea because the magician idea came back up. I was like, I kind of want to do a comic book about a magician." And the original idea for it was actually going to be set up kind of like because one of my favorite television shows of all time is The Twilight Zone. Mm-hmm. So originally it was going to be set up episodic. And what really fueled that is the comic book series Ice Cream Man, because every issue there's something different and sinister and dark. And, actually the first issue that we were going to write is the central point of the box for issue 2 of Pocus Hocus. So it's kind of cool how we were able to incorporate that. But the idea was that it was about this evil, sinister magician that did all this demonic stuff to the audience, and pulled them on stage. And the audience was, they had no idea that someone was being tortured or whatever, because that to me is true horror. That's what scares me, when you're not aware of your surroundings and what's happening to you. But, Will and I fleshed out the idea then of a magician who sells his soul, and then the journey of him to reclaim it. So Will, I'll go and let you take it from here then.
Yeah, so we talked about different, when he came to me with the original idea, we talked about different genres we could do with it and different tones and that sort of thing. And I think we ultimately landed on some, obviously sticking with the magician sells his soul trajectory. We landed on that, and we decided to incorporate some dark comedy because we've both always loved a dark comedy. I come from a background of theater and film, so I kind of started talking about things just in terms of structure, and we started talking about how we would outline each issue and figured out our methods, for all that stuff. Like all the boring stuff,
Oh, yeah, you're good.
the pre-writing stuff and all that. But I told him very early on, I was like, you may not realize that you've done this, but essentially you're doing like this idea is its own version of like a Faust story, a Faustian story.
Yes, absolutely.
And I was familiar with Faust through through my theater background and just, being aware of Dr. Faustus and all that. So that was really appealing to me. And we kind of just fused those two sensibilities together. And this is ultimately what we came up with. And I think we discovered that we worked a lot better together, writing, especially for this medium, than we'd ever really thought of or realized before.
Yeah, because, whenever Will and we were first setting everything up, this is both of our first comic book. So we had to make it special, and we wanted to do it right. We didn't want to suffer from the first timer syndrome. Right. So with the guidance of a lot of our friends, people who are already ingrained in the indie community, we were able to put a team together, and it's been just such an amazing ride so far. And I think the big thing too that Will and I really try to hone in on, we're not naive. I mean, we're stupid, but we're not naive. we know that the Faust story and selling your soul to a demon is one of the oldest stories ever told. I mean, hell, there's a song written about it, about a man going to Georgia to sell his soul to the devil.
Mm-hmm.
So we really try to make it our own unique take, and ultimately we just want to have fun with it, and we hope the reader has as much fun reading it as we do writing it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. What they say is like art is inspired by art, so it's always usually circles around in every generation, every century or whatever. There's always going to be a little bit of a twist to something that's probably already been told or already been seen. but it gives a little bit of extra, I guess you could say, a little extra levity of sorts to just kind of get the message across and be like, hey, this is something that is universal in a way. So, it's really, really good. And I have to say, like, it goes into the movie we're going to be talking about, of course, because I do find that even with the art, by the way, gorgeous. And even the demon himself in there kind of has that little bit of El Fauno, the fawn, if you will.
Yeah, it does.
It really does. He has that little bit of a look to him anyway.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I can kind of see some of the inspiration. And you guys are talking about my favorite movie as well. This is my number one favorite movie for years.
Wow. Okay,
awesome. Because
it's been at the top of my list for many years since I saw it in 2006.
Yes.
Because whenever we were first in talks of doing a movie, Will and I, we were kind of going back and forth. It's like, well, do we each want to just do our own movie? And then it's like, well, let's just do a movie that we both love. And it was almost immediate. Like, let's just do Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, that's great.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Because
when that movie, I just remember seeing at least the trailers for it and being excited. And then, of course, it dropped in the theater because I used to work at a theater a long time ago in there. And I would just be like, people need to go see this. I would even try to drop hints to customers and be like, yeah, definitely go check it out, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So it was just so good. But I've seen it, probably at least a handful of times while I was in theaters before it finally came out on DVD and everything. But it just stays with you. It's a beautiful film, and you can see some of that resonance in y'all's work here for this one, because I think there's that fantasy, there's that horror, there's that drama element to it as well.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, you said before, our illustrator, Brian Belando, he's better than what we could have asked for. Without a doubt, he's better what we deserve. And he draws a lot of his inspiration from Hellboy and Junji Ito manga and stuff like that. So it's just, it all kind of works perfect. And like you said, like, even our demon, I didn't think about it until you said it, but it really kind of does look like the fawn of the labyrinth, doesn't it?
Yeah. Because you had mentioned your illustrator. How did you guys find him and convince him to work on your project?
Yeah, convincing was the scariest part. We'll start with that.
Isn't it?
Because
sales pitch.
Because how do you condense your own work into one sentence to send to somebody and be like, hey, do you want to work on this? Especially, Will and I, mainly I'll speak for myself, but I'm my own worst critic. But I think everyone is, right?
Oh, a lot of artists are. We can totally relate,
So, and I'll let Will talk about the art process with this, because he's better at explaining it. But whenever we wrote our script, I remember we were going back and forth, and it's like, Will, is this good enough? And then we sent it out to Brian, and he absolutely loved it. And Will, I'll go and let you talk about what all we did with that in the selection process, man.
Yeah, we took a look at his Instagram and looked at illustrations he had done before in the past, kind of like his portfolio, social media portfolio. And we felt like he would be a really good fit. And, when we agreed upon it, or when we agreed on it and reached out to him to see if he wanted to do it, there was some, obviously some nervousness about, like Alan was saying, can we sell this to him? Will it be something that he wants to commit to for being at that point? Well, we knew it was going to be 6 issues, but we didn't really have like any plans at that point for another arc and stuff like that, like we do now. Yeah. And he was very enthusiastic about it, and that made us both really happy, because so much of this, especially with this issue coming out to, has been collaborative, and we've been very lucky in the sense that there are moments when we can go to Brian and ask for his input on things and say, okay, what are your sensibilities telling you about, building this part of the world and the story and that kind of thing. So it's just been a really nice marriage of styles, I guess. And I think that, I cannot remember if we told him when we were developing talking about the design for the demon, if we wanted it to look like the fauna in Pan's Labyrinth or not.
No, we didn't. We just let him go. We just said we need a demon.
And by default, that's going to happen because, the Del Toro influence. runs deep. So when I looked at the illustration for the first time, I've got an 11 by 17 concept illustration hanging in my office right now. I love to look at it, but I was like, oh yeah, that is very much referencing Pan's Labyrinth, and I love it because I love the design of the font and I love the earthy kind of look.
Yes, and this bleeds over to and you guys will see it on the Kickstarter in a preview page. You get your first glimpse of our version of Hell. And it looks, and we are so excited for issue 3 because that's when we finally really get to just throw everything at everything.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you as a reader, I'm really excited for part 3 of this. And I just want to touch real quick on the Kickstarter history. I had listened to you guys on a separate podcast fairly recently that I'm also a subscriber to. And I know that you had talked about how you guys are really pleased with how it seems like more and more backers have been coming on to the project. Can you talk a little bit about maybe like where you're hoping this third campaign will go? And
so Will has been insufferable ever since the success of the second campaign. He rides around town in limousines just throwing out wads of cash.
Wow. That's where the Kickstarter money is like, we need more
guys,
people to join it.
I couldn't put any of it in production costs because Will was too busy to celebrate.
Right.
And for limousine cost and gas.
No, so
money well spent.
Champagne in there, I hope too.
No,
there's a booster seat made of gold for my cat.
Man. So it was crazy because this is Will and I. Whenever we talked about it initially, it's Kickstarter still very new to us. I mean, this is only our third campaign that we're running, and it's weird to me anyway because this is the first hobby I've ever done where I've asked people to help support it. And it's like, well, how do you go about doing that, especially in a tasteful and tactful way? But that's how it is in the indie world. You really need your fans and supporters to succeed. And we set the goal for issue 1 at $1,000 because we felt that was good, and we ended up made $2,200 and had 73 backers.
Wow.
And we were so pleased with that, especially in this medium too, because one thing that you can always prepare for it, but you don't know till it happens. Making your own comic book is pretty expensive, and shipping, that is the most expensive thing probably on the planet.
Daunting and scary too, right?
So whenever we did the goal for issue 2, we set it at $3,000, and we're like, oh God, I don't know if we're going to hit that. That's way too much. And to our surprise, we ended up making around $6,300. Wow. And we had 173 backers. So we literally had 100 more backers than we did for issue 1. And to me, that's the most important thing. Obviously having the extra funds to go toward the comic and all the add-ons and everything like that. That's awesome. But I just want to get this into the hands of as many people as possible because at the end of the day, when Will and I talk about it, it's a passion project more than anything.
Yeah.
Right. You can definitely tell it's y'all's baby. And that's the thing about being an artist, because Chad and I were artists in our own rights too. So that's particularly for me within film. So I went to film school and all that stuff. And when it's like when your mind just creates something and you work so hard on it, you want it to be perfect, especially when it's that first big project, because you really want it to be good and you want to convince people to that. It's good. But at the same time, you're kind of a little scared because you're like, please don't treat it badly.
and we kind of really did. We put it all out there, Will, wouldn't you say? Especially for our first project.
Yeah, I think so. I think that we were working in like a genre, and like we are lucky in the sense that like we're working in a genre and with material that we really, really love and geek out over, so I mean that, that definitely helps. But yeah, we really did. We threw it all out there, and what's been incredible too is like going forward since this has happened, we really are staying on track with our original story and idea and vision for the project, because this was always a project where after we started outlining things, it's like it gets better with each installment. Yeah. And so after by the time the Kickstarter for issue 2 had gotten done and we had sort of outperformed by our expectations that much. It was like, wow, okay, this is our exposition pretty much. We thought we were being risky, keeping some exposition for issue 2, saving some of that for issue 2, and people are really digging this. I mean, so we've really got this is really cool because we are confident that it gets better from here. So that's why. Yeah, well, that's why when campaigns like a campaign like this for issue 3 rolls around, you really don't know what to expect, because this was the issue where I thought, oh, okay, well, if we get 1K or 2K over our goal, it'll be issue 3, because it's so strong. And I mean, we've sort of, in the past 2 campaigns have, things like that have happened. So I'm really really interested to see with an issue where we're kind of expecting it. What's going to happen? I just want to know. I mean, I'm along for the ride, so.
Yeah, like we said, we took a calculated risk by telling the story linearly, because we could have started it, we could have Pan's Labyrinth it, right? We could have started at the end and then worked our way backwards. But we really wanted just to go ahead and set up, this is our character. These are our players. And then in issue 2, develop those characters just a little bit more so we can really get to our conflict and where we need to be. And like Will said, we didn't expect issue 2 to do well at all, honestly, because it was really just a continuation of issue 1. We tightened up a lot of things, but issue 3, because the campaign had already ended, and we were already done with the script for issue 3 by that point. It was already sent off to get illustrated and everything. And after we finished the script, we're like, okay, this is the one. Like Will said, if people are jumping into Pocus Hocus, they're going to want to get issue 3, because this is it. So we're hoping that everyone that has backed issue 1 and 2 come back for issue 3, because we know they're going to love it. And then we obviously on the Kickstarter have a catch-up tier for those just joining us. And we're so excited to have you on this ride with us.
That's awesome, because it really feels like that roller coaster effect where you're going up that hill. And so part 3 definitely feels like, okay, we're about to now take the dive. So everything's really set up nicely here.
I mean, issues 1 and 2, the stakes were definitely getting higher.
Yeah. And I'm already intrigued with the Emily character, so I'm like already wanting to see what she's going to do and stuff too. I'm excited for it. So you guys did a wonderful job here.
Well, awesome. Thank you.
So good job on you guys. And by the way, just by curiosity, can you give us a little bit of a tease about what is part 3, what to expect from part 3?
Will, do you want to do this one?
Yeah, the best teaser for part 3 is right at the end of issue, pretty much at the end of issue 2, in our on a thank you page, and then our final caption for the final page, which is, it takes place in hell. It's Emily and Pocus are going to hell now. So we've got them to this point, and it's always like the signs have always been pointing in those directions, I think, and now it's finally going to happen. So we really get the I like to think that, like, not that, don't get me wrong, I mean, I love the Victorian stuff, I love the magician stuff, and the visual artistry there in the atmosphere. I could play on that playground all day long. But now we're like, I feel like with issue 3, it's like comic book world. That's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah,
so
and I guess the other teaser that we would have, we want people to go in with the mindset of how Pocus and the Demon were at the beginning of issue 1 and issue 2, because the demon is actually in Pocus's realm. So we wanted to flip that on its head, with Pocus being in the demon's realm now. And we really wanted to play off that, and we won't say anything else.
Oh, that's going to be interesting, because the demon characters, he's pretty funny too.
Some
of his lines and stuff that comes in through there, I'm like, oh, he's just teasing here or something. What's going on? Yeah. But so anyway, I guess we'll go ahead and start talking about the movie of the night, Pan's Labyrinth. Cool. So I gotta ask, what made you guys decide on Pan's Labyrinth here?
I mean, it's one of our favorites, right? Will, you actually introduced it to me in high school.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Right. Yeah. It's one of our favorites in high school. Obviously, it came out like right around the time that we had that Alan and I had just started hanging out. We both were really big fans of Del Toro, and I mean, Oh boy, this is one of those questions where it's like I have so many things to say or so many answers for it that I gotta kind of pick my words wisely here. But it's we picked it because aside from our mutual love of it and it just always having a presence throughout our lives, anytime him and I talk about film or pop culture, anything, it always just seems to be somewhere like that's the standard, you know. So for just to reinforce what I'm saying here really quick, anyone who knows me personally throughout the past couple of years, whenever we talk about horror movies now, I always bring up Hereditary because that's like the new gold standard for me when it comes to horror films. So, but Pan's Labyrinth was like that just for everything, you know. It was like all roads led back to it. So, in addition to all that stuff, it also, I feel like, just in terms of the vibe and subconscious influences and maybe more even conscious influences on our comic book, I feel like there's a lot of Del Toro influence, and Pan's Labyrinth is, I mean, I think hands down his best movie. I mean, at least from my
same here. I like Shape of Water too, but
don't get me wrong,
too, but oh my gosh, Pan's Labyrinth is, I think it's his opus or
masterwork.
Yeah, it really is.
It's his masterpiece. Yeah, I think so.
What about you, Alan? Like, what draws you to Pan's Labyrinth?
Obviously, I'm a huge sucker for Disney movies. It's a comfort thing for me, right? And Disney in cinema, what they have done is they set the gold standard for fairy tales, because that's where your mind goes to, is the classic Disney cartoons, right?
Yes.
I mean, at the beginning of the Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, there's a storybook that opens. And it leads to the story that tells it. And Pan's Labyrinth is no exception. It starts with that storybook opening. Once upon a time, there was a princess. You know what I mean? And it's just chef's kiss already.
It really is.
Gold right there. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry. No, I want you to.
I was going to say, and it balances, the real world with the fairy tale world, and it marries them so well together. And it has you scratching your head up until the end, which we'll get to later. Right. But yeah, it's just, it has everything that I love. It has high fantasy, low fantasy, horror, suspense. It checks off so many boxes, right?
It really does.
Yeah. And that for me is why I love it so much.
Yeah, you mentioned, I just want to add this really quick, and I'll do my kitchen sink version of it. I mean, we're on a movie podcast, so I felt like, this would be the appropriate place to mention it or to talk about it. But essentially what you're describing and why that appeals to you, what appeals to you so much about that and that storytelling quality is, it's the same for me too, this idea of myth. There's archetypes, mythology, and I can't take credit for this little comparison because there's already been a great little movie monologue written about it by a guy named Quentin Tarantino in Kill Bill 2, when David Carradine has that shot glass and he's talking about Superman and the mythology of comic books, which is totally fascinating. But that, I think that all ties into all of this is the why it's so appealing to me and fascinating to both Alan and myself, is there's just the idea of myth and mythology and how storytelling connects to all that. Because for as long as I've known Alan, I know you've taken an interest in theology too, right? I mean, just like different religions and cultures, So I think Pan's Labyrinth connects to all of that, and you can see how the strings sort of attach to the comic book as well when you think of it from the perspective of film as myth, film as mythology, or storytelling as myth, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Because either way, you still have that same structure. Either way, you got like the antagonist, protagonist, you got the conflict, you got the drama. It's just hero has their motivations. All the characters do, so it just all kind of has that same bone structure, no matter what. So it gets there for sure. Now, the interesting thing is that we try to do a brief synopsis, but I try to think what would be a synopsis to explain with this movie, because to me, I feel like there's no words. It always changes up to explain Pan's Labyrinth. I can never seem to find always the right words. Because then later on, I sit there and I think back on what I say, and I'm like, damn, I should have said this and this too, but while I was at it, because I always there's always something else to add to it. But if we were to sum up Pan's Labyrinth, like, what do you think that we would say? I mean, like, what's a good way of probably summing up Pan's Labyrinth?
I guess it's a story about a little girl and her mother who are 5 years after the Spanish Civil War being taken to an officer in the army, and it just centers around the mother's pregnancy with the officer's child and the girl's escape into a fantasy world. Maybe.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I would argue that there are two movies here, and it is
it's hard.
There are like, this is like the Bible for combining two different movies or two different parallel worlds just seamlessly, because I mean, it never feels like tonally weird or uneven or anything like that. So having said that, I would say that there are two brief descriptions. The first one I would say is that it's the first one I would say is that it's an adult fairy tale that looks at fascism versus imagination. Like that's kind of thematically, what it deals with, and fascism, evil versus innocence, that kind of thing. Your typical thematic stuff.
Right.
The second story, which is the more literal one, is that a girl goes to live with her new stepfather, who is a member of the fascist regime, and basically has to find escape and solace through her fantasy world and through her imagination world as like the horrors of war and reality start to close in on that situation.
And it blends for her. The worlds start to really meld.
They start to cross over, and
which you can't blame her too, because she's pretty much in an abusive home. The guy, in this case, like when we talk about fairy tales, the general is the wicked stepmother, but this time the wicked stepfather.
Right.
So she's, it reminds me a lot of different stories from people who've gone through abusive homes and stuff like that, especially with our own mom. Cinderella was her big outlet and stuff like that. And sometimes in order to cope with the darkness, you have to find a little bit of some sort of glimmer of hope somewhere. And usually and in this case, Ophelia, her fantasy world was kind of like that little a glimmer of hope, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
In order to find maybe her own strength and see what she's capable of in order to try to get out of that. So, see what I mean? Like, oh man, I could just go so deep. There's always something so different every time I watch the movie. So.
Oh yeah, it's one of those that you peel back layers, and I think that the movie, like I mean, obviously it's anti-war. Every movie is, what movie isn't? No, but I mean, but I mean, I think that more than being like anti-war, and more than being like having this message of like world peace or something like that, I think it's more interested just in looking at the resilience of imagination, especially the resilience of a child's imagination, and how it can make sense of an increasingly ugly and violent world. And that really speaks to me and is really fascinating, especially that the movie does it in such a way that feels like, I mean, it feels like the Hellboy version of that, or it feels like almost like I don't want to say like comic book version of that, because you're dealing in two different mediums there when you bring that to the equation. But it feels like it feels like a fairy tale, tale for adults, and communicates in that way. And I just I think it does it. I think it does that so well and finds that balance so well. It really is about imagination versus rigid conformity, or imagination versus oppression, and the way that having imagination and that ability to stay young mentally is a way to cope with that, and a way to deal with it, and make sense with it. Because all the monsters are metaphorical, in the movie. Yeah,
that's the thing. Like, I even sit there and I've thought about this so many times, but how it also in a way kind of compares with the Anne Frank story, with how she had to
100%.
go through, so you brought up that it comes from a child's perspective in a way, and in a very cruel environment. What better way to get that across to people? Because the whole idea too from it is that it's to make you feel something as an adult.
Definitely.
You hope that it touches your heart and that it does pull in your heartstrings, and we have to have a little bit of that in order to have the empathy and sometimes even the sympathy and stuff like that. So it's just either way, the movie gets me a little bit tear up and choke up too. So it's so good.
Well, you did a standing ovation in the theater.
Yeah, that's a fun little story about just a fun little anecdote. The first time I saw the movie, I had to drive with my friends to Charleston, which is an hour away from where Alan and I live, because
they know. Oh, they know. They're West Virginia boys. Yeah.
For those who don't know, I figured you guys, would probably pick up or be familiar with Charleston in some capacity. But so we went to a movie theater there to watch it, and I was 16 years old, and it was the saddest thing in the world, because it was over. And everybody got up to leave, just like a normal movie ends or whatever. It's okay, time to go out to the car. Yeah. And I just immediately broke into applause. So it's just one teenage kid in a theater full of people, just applauding.
And keep in mind, this was before the era of Marvel post-credit sequences.
Yeah.
So Will just had to let it all out right then and there. Yeah.
Right. It was. I mean, it had been recommended to me by friends, but I had no idea how much it was going to affect me. By the time it was over. It's just there's just nothing like it. It's just a wholly original and beautiful movie, and it's very, very haunting, very personal. And it's really, I feel like every movie that Del Toro's done since then has been somewhat personal, very personal in a lot of different ways. But that was kind of, for me, that was when he was really at the peak of it, where it was this is what I can do with a budget and a
man, and the cinematography in the movie.
Personal.
Oh yeah.
This one definitely felt like his very most personal work, and maybe even see a little bit of depth of who he is and maybe what he's also gone through as well. So I agree with you. I think this was probably his most personal work.
Definitely. And it's cool to see the transition, especially coming from The Devil's Backbone.
Yes.
Which I always feel like is a strong comparison with this movie.
It is.
Yeah, they have, they kind of I believe they take place around the same time, if I remember correctly.
I believe they're both during the Civil War.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Or during the Spanish Civil War, excuse me.
Obviously, I love Devil's Backbone, but I feel like that was just a precursor for him to be like, okay, now I kind of know what I can do with a good ghost story. Let's see what I can do now.
Yeah.
And you brought up a good point, like the cinematography, chef's kiss. And it ended up winning the Academy Award for that, actually. So,
I couldn't remember.
It picked up a few Academy Awards. I want to say maybe 3, right? Yeah,
that sounds right.
Art direction, cinematography, and best makeup. And
it was nominated for 6 total.
6 total.
6 total, but
it should have won all 6.
It really should.
I
agree.
It really should have got more nominations than what it got.
Right. I mean, I was, of course, watching the Oscars because I saw the movie the night of the Oscars. So, I mean, I was watching, I was furious that,
Same here.
But I mean, it's now it's like if I were watching the Oscars, I would expect that. And I might even be wrong because Parasite just won a couple years ago, which just nearly made me throw up.
I know. I was hopefully that opened the door. I'd like to.
I know.
I mean, that's awesome, but it's that's incredible. I mean, you really could have fooled me.
And they say foreign films don't do well in the box.
Yeah, and we listen. But before we go off on a tangent, Will and I we sat down together and watched Parasite. We'll have to do a discussion on that one day.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah, that one's kind of going up there on my list a little bit too. Lately.
It's a good one.
Will had talked about his first time seeing the movie. Alan, when was the first time that you saw the movie, that you caught wind of it?
Yeah, so I think around this time, I can't remember if I just straight up bought it or what, but I picked up a copy of it because I didn't watch it in theaters. The first foreign language film that I remember actually watching in theaters that blew my mind was The Orphanage.
Ooh, I love that movie.
Yeah,
too.
No,
So good.
I remember the ending of that movie and I was crushed. But anyway, that's a whole nother beast. Speaking of being crushed by endings, so I watched Pan's Labyrinth, and I remember watching the film at home, and when it was over, I didn't want to buy into the literal or the, I guess, the metaphorical ending of, the life will always live on. Your memory will always live on for those who are looking for it. The girl saved her brother through a subconscious means and everything like that. And, she did die, and she used her fairy tales as an escape from her awful situation where she didn't want to be. I remember watching it the first time and I was like, oh, okay, cool. So she really was a princess. I wanted that. I wanted that happy ending.
That's the beauty of the movie, because I think you can always take that as well. Like, because
and that's the thing too.
It fools you a little bit.
Yeah. First time watching it, whenever at the end of the movie, when after she's shot and she's in the realm with her mom and dad again, it does the close up, and this is another thing that we all have touched on. It's a beautiful shot of her lifting up her shoes, and she's wearing ruby red shoes. Obviously a Wizard of Oz reference for that. She went home, and it's one of those man, just chilling moments. Even when you think about it, like
it's setting chills up my spine just talking about it. Like remembering that moment that you're talking about. Yeah, it's when you. I'm sure you've experienced this too. When you love film and you really try to watch the masterpieces and that kind of thing, when you find yourself talking about it with other people later who haven't seen these movies or maybe are not as familiar with them, they always tend to sound like so depressing. And it's why do you do that to yourself? Why do you, and because that's drama. That's all the way back to, a Greek tragedy, catharsis and all that fun stuff. That's, so I mean, it does tend to get a little depressing sometimes because drama is, but I feel like if it sounds like that with Pan's Labyrinth, and anyone listening to this or what, at home who's never seen it, don't think that it's, don't get the impression that it's some just awful dirge and then it's over. It really is like a fairy tale, and it's a beautifully executed one. And there are a lot of thriller elements, and there are some really
there's shocking moments in this.
There are some shocking moments, but even the violence, even the more brutal violence in the movie is done in a very cinematically poetic way, a very tasteful way. And the characters are all very complex and three-dimensional. It is not some boring art house slog.
Each of them have their own. They all kind of have their own thing going on, and as a viewer, we know that, we see that, but there's kind of not a whole lot of communication between them in that aspect. It's just kind of doing my thing because we see the general just care about. He just wants the baby pretty much, and Ophelia wants to get away, and the mom just wants to survive pretty much. And I mean, it's just crazy stuff.
And I'll go ahead and be the one to do this. This is obviously the elephant in the room, because we're probably going to talk about this for a while. So we'll try to condense it down, or else this is going to be a 9-hour long episode.
Go for it.
The Pale Man.
And
all of the symbolism. Yes. So I almost jumped out of my chair and was like, all right, we're doing this thing. Whenever you mentioned the comparison to Anne Frank, inside of the Pale Man's room, there's a pile of shoes.
Oh yeah.
An obvious reference to Holocaust Memorial, everything like that.
Yeah.
And it's, there's obviously the allusions to Saturn eating his children. I believe that's the painting.
Yeah.
There's allusions to that, and Krampus, stuff like that. There's just all kinds of stuff jam-packed into this one room
with all the food there on the table.
Perfect example. And the table was also arranged to where it kind of mirrored the dinner in the real world, where the captain sat at the head of the table too, like the Pale Man did.
That's what I noticed. Yeah. I didn't notice the fairy tale stuff, but no, that's absolutely right. The Holocaust thing is really fascinating and spot on to me, because we mentioned Anne Frank at the beginning or earlier on when we were talking, and then the movie deals very, very heavily and strongly with fascism, so that has to be intentional.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah,
without question. And because when I was watching the Pale Man scene, I was in my mind, I was thinking, okay, like how does this mirror her real life experiences? I wasn't thinking about the mythological aspects of it and all that. And there's definitely there's a lot of that going on.
Because they show you from the beginning, and I'm happy that they do this. The first time we see Ophelia, she's in the car with her mother, and she's reading a fairy tale book, and she's holding 3 or 4 books in her hand. So she's taking everything that she's read in her books and putting it into practice in her imagination and coping. But before there was Disney and Happily Ever After, so there was Grimm fairy tales.
Yes.
And they were brutal, man. So she's embodied a lot of that. You know what I mean? Like that was commonplace stories. The story of a pale man eating fairies or eating children to those who don't finish their supper or something like that. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, and you look at it's mostly Mexican lore, I believe, but the Curse of La Llorona, if I'm saying it right. La Llorona, and like we've had some Spanish friends from Mexico where we can ask them about that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we had to hear about that when we were children." And it was just a way to make kids pretty much behave. And that's what a lot of those stories were.
I feel like American culture's pretty low on the bar of what I mean. It's like you don't get presents from Santa if you're bad this year, or you don't get money from the Tooth Fairy. Like Germans are like, listen, you're going to get drugged to hell by Krampus if you even misbehave.
Exactly. Or no La Llorona to come and get us either.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, and you have the frog monster too, which is not, admittedly not nearly as memorable as the Pale Man. But I mean, the idea of she asks the frog monster at one point, "Why do you live underneath of this
tree and just consume it,
sucking the life and beauty out of this tree, and you get fatter and fatter while the tree withers and dies away." I mean, perfect metaphor for fascism and economic oppression.
Perfect.
Exactly. A sinful thing, gluttony. So
right. It's just it's really incredible, Del Toro, this guy's career, the way he has consistently been able to walk that line between to do things that are really like really strong, meaningful, poetic art house cinema,
and mainstream it, too.
And it is mainstream for wider audiences who are maybe looking for something, who might be looking for something that's a little bit more direct. He consistently meets those objectives. I was thinking about that a little bit just recently watching Nightmare Alley. Also, the way he's able to do that kind of thing, and he's one of my favorite.
That one I want to see it so bad.
I won't. I won't spoil anything.
Well, you only live 5 minutes away from me, and if you spoil anything in that,
it's on.
But I did send you a text message. Did I not? I sent him a text message after I saw it, and I said it might be my favorite Del Toro since Pan's Labyrinth.
So, I can't wait to watch it.
It's very good. Yeah. But I mean, I also really like noir, and I also really like the darkest of the dark stuff. When it comes to human nature and noir and German expressionism and all that stuff. So I really enjoyed it, but it's pretty bleak.
Oh yeah. He shows that he has a really good balance of that, because like he's kind of like a big geek, like a lot of us are in a way. You look at like Pacific Rim. He's a big fan of the kaiju film. Me too. I love Godzilla and stuff. But when it comes to his emotional work and all this stuff, oh man, he just does it so right. I don't know how he does it necessarily, but he just does it really right. Hits all the strings right, especially on the emotional level, because that's where it really gets me the most. And that's where, I don't know, that's my sweet spot. So I'm like, if you can get me there, then you're on the right track.
You're on to something. It's firing on all cylinders, because typically what brings filmmakers with his sensibilities down in movies that are less successful than his, I think, is that they tend to they have a very strong sense of atmosphere, world building, and that kind of thing. But they don't really like when it comes to anything emotional. It gets too sentimental. It gets too literal. Maybe I don't know. But like with him, he really knows how to like pack that emotional punch and do it in subtle, nuanced ways. And it's just he's great.
So I got to ask you guys too, real quick as well. Now that it's been like, gosh, 15 years maybe since the movie came out. Wow. When did it? I know time flies, right?
Yeah.
When do you feel like it's become like your favorite movie? When did you guys? When you look back,
like was it Love at First Sight?
Yeah,
or,
like for me, it was Love at First Sight.
Yeah, I really do. I think it was Love at First Sight. Like, because I went back and rewatched the movie for this podcast, and I just as soon as you turn it on, I got that nostalgia feel. It's like, okay, I remember why I love this movie. And it's weird. I didn't want to sound like I'm a grumpy old man, but I watched it. I was like, movies aren't like this anymore, like just that feeling and just the beginning shots of everything and how everything is laid out. I was just, because Will and I, we talk about it all the time. Like 2006 and 2007 were definitely probably our favorite years for movies collectively, because we had There Will Be Blood come out, this come out, No Country for Old Men, Sweeney Todd. Like it was so many heavy hitters back to back.
2007 was like my Woodstock year, probably. for me.
Nice.
Because I remember we got together and watched the Oscars, and we were just so excited for everything because
everything was gold that year.
Yeah, it really was. No Country for Old Men. Yes, that's
so good
one as well. That's one I hope that we can get on the podcast at some point, because
we'll be waiting in the sidebar Zoom call in case you guys need to bring other people in.
Yeah, we'll be on call for that one. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
we'll get on there. Be like, Pocus Hocus 3's on Kickstarter. Issue 4's coming out soon. Whatever you guys get. Okay, so No Country for Old Men. Yeah.
So I gotta ask you, and I know this is kind of a weird question, but it's one that Josh normally asks everybody. But if there was a sequel to this film, if there was,
hypothetically,
how do you think that would go, and who do you think you would want to see in the movie?
Actually, I talked to Will about this because this is a hard question to answer, right? My first knee-jerk reaction to answer you guys is to say, I'm leaving this podcast and there should never be a sequel to this movie. Why would you ever ask that? What I would like to see, though, I think this would be really cool. Do you guys remember the art style that they used to tell the lore in Hellboy 2, Golden Army, with the wooden figures and stuff like that? I would love to see a prequel to this movie, but just really building off the fairy tale world about the princess that wanted to be human. I think, and then including all the mythical creatures and stuff like that into this cool little fairy tale short, just to kind of give a little bit more lore and background to Ophelia's imagination and what she's seeing and why she's seeing what she's seeing, and even incorporate some stuff with the Pale Man, the Toad, everything like that. That's what I would, instead of a sequel. I know that kind of doesn't really answer the question directly.
That's part of the other question too. Is like, what would you think of also a remake and all that stuff? So instead of offering a sequel or a remake, you're saying a prequel, which that would be very interesting, especially on the fantasy elements, and that's more of the world building, which sounds like that's more of what you're interested in. Probably
I love
an idea.
Yeah, and that's and that kind of bleeds into my writing whenever I approach Will, because I always want to start with the world. And I say, Will, what can we do this? What are our laws? What are our limitations? Because we try to really hone in on inconsistencies. And because we want the experience to be as fun for the reader as possible. Yeah. And I love knowing all I can about something. And I just think a prequel would be so cool, just to see the princess world and then why she wanted to be human and stuff like that. Did she Little Mermaid it? Did she witness a human? And she's like, now I want to be part of your world. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Will, what would you want to see?
She's got a lot of bobs.
Yeah. What do they call them? Legs?
Feet.
I would want to, if there were, obviously, hypotheticals, because the movie by design is not particularly sequel friendly. However, I think it would be cool if something like that had to be done. I think it would be kind of intriguing to see another story completely separate from the one in Pan's Labyrinth that is taking place around the Civil War. you know, where is the fawn moving to next, and what kind of moral dilemmas and coming of age situations, because I feel like it would have to involve a child just by the nature of the, you know, so maybe it's a little boy taking care of his you know, dying mother or father or something during the war, and like, you know, there's a, you know, the only scenario that could be more depressing than
like his home blew up now, and
yeah, it's like it's all right. Yeah,
everyone's sleeping in the same bed, like in Willy Wonka.
Right.
Oh, don't even get me started on Grandpa Joe.
Oh
yeah, he's a piece of crap. He was able to move.
Exactly, he was just milking his age.
Okay, we're gonna have to do like a sidebar episode then on me just blasting Grandpa Joe for 20 minutes.
The fawn walks in and everybody's in bed, and he's just like, he looks around and he's just like, nope. I'm
out. Okay, I can't fix this.
I thought the girl in Spain had it bad enough.
Yeah. It's like right. It's like Poseidon or somebody.
Yeah.
Oh no,
this
isn't my bag, man.
I'd be like, wait a minute, they sent me on this mission. Let's get the pale man out here.
This is a job for the pale man.
Well, in that case, so just to kind of sum up everything, we talked about Pan's Labyrinth here. I was kind of curious before we go to, what are some of your other favorite movies?
So I'm obviously a huge fan of animation. Claymation, though, is really where my jaw always hits the floor. So I'm a huge fan of, obviously, Nightmare Before Christmas, and but my gold standard for claymation, it seems like I have one that I love, and then I find another one that I love even more. Paranorman knocks it out of the park for me.
Absolutely.
Kubo and the Two Strings. I still haven't gotten over that movie yet. But, you know, aside from those, I'm a huge fan of There Will Be Blood. Thank You for Smoking is my go-to comedy that I absolutely love to watch, you know, completely shamelessly. And you know, everyone has their guilty pleasure movies. Bloodsport with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah.
Love it every time.
Action, martial arts. Yeah.
Bloodsport, Kickboxer. It's the same movie. But I love Bloodsport.
Bloodsport's mine too. I like that one. What about you, Will?
I actually just recently revamped my top 10.
Nice.
But rather than give you like a big, you know, countdown and you know, turn this into the
Will Radford countdown show,
the Will Radford channel's Roger Ebert show.
Did you put Night of the Hunter on there? Because I forgot to mention that one.
That's a really good movie.
I do love that one.
Not on my list, but it could be.
Well, it should be.
Yeah, I mean, not on the top 10. You know. Yeah. No, I really these days I don't know. I'm a really big fan of Solaris, Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris.
Right.
I might be slowly creeping in for the favorite movie category. I love Dead Ringers. I love Mulholland Drive. I love Ravenous. There Will Be Blood, Ghost World, and Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Oh, yeah, such a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And Fantastic Planet and Batman Returns, and I think that's all of us.
Yeah, nice.
It's just like
you guys have some really good classic ones, and for me, I'm sitting there like, my top 10 would probably be a little bit.
And that's the beauty of it all too, right? Because like, and then there's one thing that Will and I definitely have agreed on. We've talked about it extensively. Robert Eggers for both of us.
Yes.
You know, whenever we both saw The Witch, like, and that is probably as of right now easily top 2 favorite horror movies of all time. You know,
I love that movie. Yeah,
completely blown away. But yeah, that's obviously could be a topic for another time. But yeah,
absolutely. You're all good. It's really weird because sometimes when it comes to those movies that has a witch character and it's just scary, crazy, or whatever, I get obsessed with those kind of characters. I really, even in some of my writings, I sit there and I'm like, "There's a scary witch here," blah blah blah. So,
we can't wait for you. Hopefully, you guys stick with Pocus.
Oh,
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
I mean, like one of my all-time scary ones, honestly, is from the movie Return to Oz. That's just one of my childhood classics.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
the
man.
Princess Mombi character, just there's a certain scene in there where we see her wake up, and that scared me as a kid, and it just always stayed. So I've had this thing for also body horror, so like missing body parts. I'm like, gotta include that in there somewhere in my stories, so especially decapitation. So I know
Are you a Cronenberg fan with the body horror?
A little bit. It just depends because like I've also seen some stuff that was pretty extreme, like that I just would not revisit again. Like if you ever heard of like the German necromantic films, I will not revisit those again. And recently heard about this 2016 Spanish film called Night of the Virgin, which is meant to be like a comedy horror. Yeah, and it's
cool.
It's like a teen sex comedy gone wrong, and it turns into horror. So and there's
I know the
familiar with that one.
I think because I have Shudder. I don't know if it's the same movie, but is the whole thing like a parody and like
It's really okay. It's really weird because I have not been able to see like the whole movie, but I saw like this. I spoiled myself, and I saw like the long 10-minute near the end thing of what happens with this guy who's the virgin character.
Oh wow! Okay.
And it's like, I mean, any bodily orifice and fluid you can think of is all that happens, and also in this scene. And I was like, okay, yeah, that turned my stomach a little bit. I don't think I could. Watch this whole thing. But, and I sit there and I love like Peter Jackson's film Dead Alive.
Oh yeah, Dead Alive is so
like
good.
So Dead Alive, the first time I watched that, Dead Alive turned my stomach. I don't know what it was about. Yeah, it was the same scene for you as the lawnmower scene where he's running through the house holding up the lawnmower.
That, and then there's like the pus scene. Like
I was fine with that. It was the lawnmower scene was what killed me.
That was bad too. Yeah.
The worst one for me was the ear in the soup.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
I think it's the way you're talking about. I can't remember.
It's the same. Yep.
It's the same scene. Actually.
Yep.
Well, I read about that movie, and its reputation and how they handed out barf bags and how, like when it opened and how like it at the time it was released, I think it had like the most gore being pumped per second in some places. Like it really just went over the top. But for me, the places that got me as far as grossing me out were those little moments like the soup eating scene.
Oh yeah.
So it's funny though, because obviously I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan. It's probably my favorite franchise that's out there. And I remember there was a behind the scenes talk about it whenever Peter Jackson first brought people in to do the test screenings for it. The studio was thinking, what the hell did we get ourselves into? Because he had the walls lined with posters from his other movies. So there's stuff like Dead Alive and Frighteners and stuff like that all in there. And he, everyone's like, oh my God, like, is this guy going to be able to do this? And then the guy that made Dead Alive made Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Won like 10 Oscars.
Yeah.
Return of the King.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. And goes on to show you like, oh gosh, like some of those filmmakers who made kind of like the small budget horror films who went on to just go on direct the big budget stuff. You look at the guy, Mike Dougherty, who directed Trick or Treat and then went into
love that movie.
Directing Godzilla King of the Monsters. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see the dichotomies, the differences and stuff like that. But oh my God, yeah. I don't know. I've seen some pretty extreme stuff like we were saying, and just some of them I can't. I'm like, no. But for some reason, Dead Alive, I have no problem with. It's just to me, it's funny. But I guess when it comes to some
hilarious.
of the, yeah, and necromantic, that's more about necrophilia, and then the other one was I don't even know how to just. I don't want to spoil it for you guys unless you decide to go see it or something.
No, I'm curious. I'm very curious.
Basically, at the end, there's a male pregnancy that happens, and it's very graphic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They really went all out.
They did. All right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up, guys. And I want to say thank you for coming by. And then also, if you guys want to, go ahead and give the information again, like when the Kickstarter starts and how long it goes for, and then also where people can find you.
Definitely. Again, I'm Alan Dunford. half of the Pocus Hocus Dream Team, right? Or writing staff, I should say. You can find me on Twitter at Chaps of Fury is my handle. And the Pocus Hocus is going to be running January 25th through 30 days after that. So I guess February 24th. And the best way to reach out to us is obviously just through Kickstarter. Our Pocus Hocus Gmail account is linked to there, and that's pocushocuscomic@gmail.com. So if you have any questions about anything, Will and I are eager to answer those questions, and we hope to see you in the series.
Nice. Go ahead, Will.
So my as far as social media goes, you can find me on Instagram, and my handle on that for that is willrad82. That's willrad82. And then if you want to check out any of my film and video work, you can go to vimeo.com/willrad, WILLRAD.
Yep. And obviously we want to end with this. Thank you guys. Really.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Yeah. We love comic books, but the first thing that Will and I ever bonded over was film. So it's awesome to be able to do this and talk about one of the first movies that we bonded over.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
So man, it's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you guys. It's been a blast.
Oh yeah, no problem. And thank you guys for being on the podcast and for sharing your project with us, and also for talking about this movie, because I do think that we hit every bullet we can on terms of analyzing this movie. It's one of my favorites, and we can go on and on and on. So yeah, it was great. Thank you so much.
And I agree. This is a really, really fun conversation, and you guys are welcome back onto the show anytime. Please check out Alan Will's Kickstarter campaign for Pocus Hocus number 3. You can find the link to it in our show notes below, or you can look for it on our social media profiles on Instagram and Twitter via ynfmoviepod. You can also find me, Chad, on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd via the screen name Green Screen Grin. And Chris, tell the people where they can find you at.
Sure. You guys can find me on Instagram at xtopher of Oz. And then on Instagram, it's CBC Monkey. Letterboxd, I'm on there as well. I can't remember which one it is, if it's CBC Monkey or if it's xtopher of Oz. I think it's CBC Monkey. But either way, you guys can find me there too. You can find me through Chad and Josh. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Chad and I had a great time.